Hello, everyone. We are at Lake Lanier Islands today to attend a retirement luncheon for one of our industry veterans, Tim Moss. I wanted to take the opportunity to interview Tim upon his retirement, and he agreed to meet up with me today before this celebration. Tim, we've known each other for many years, but I can't honestly pinpoint when we first met. Maybe you'll remember. In any case, please dive in and tell us your story.
Well, good morning, Bill. It's good to be here. I'm glad you took the opportunity to come to my retirement party. I think the first time we met was probably at a conference when you were at Vulcan in the conference room. We had a meeting to kind of go over initiatives. So I think that's probably the first time we met.
Yes.
Along with Joe Wolf and probably a couple of others.
There you go.
So, well, a little about myself. I was actually born and raised in Georgia in Covington. Went to high school there, went to church there, and pretty much lived my entire life in Covington. Did a brief stint in college, figured that was not for me. Felt a calling to join the military. I served in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years, so actually went out of the country. But was stationed in North Carolina, went to San Antonio for basic training. I was a command post controller, and went from there to Biloxi for technical training, and ended up being stationed in Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina. And that's obviously, Fort Bragg surrounds Pope Air Force Base. So, and I went at a time, it was the Grenada conflict, and so it just, it was one of those things I felt a duty to do, and so did 4 years, and then got out of the Air Force, and we got married while I was in the Air Force. We had a child, and moved back to Covington, and was on the search for a job. So my wife had basically went to work where she was working before when we left Georgia, but we had a good time. North Carolina was a great place to live. Met some good friends up there. Had our landlord that used to go fishing with, and he was an older guy that didn't have a care in the world. And I remember being on a river fishing trip with him, and the motor wasn't working, and he was constantly back there trying to get it to crank as we kept floating closer and closer to the dam. So I'm thinking, I'm 20 years old. I'm thinking, I don't know if I can swim this guy out of this current, but we had some good times up there, and it was didn't make a lot of money, but we had a lot of fun, and
yes.
Obviously the military has good benefits, but so you didn't have to come out of pocket with a lot, but we would scrape up change to go get a hot fudge sundae at McDonald's, which was a treat back then. So, but that's pretty much my story. We've got 2 kids. Daughter's actually up here, a retirement party with us. She's married. We've got 2 grandkids, 2 grandgirls that we love. Both of them play softball, so we go enjoy a lot of softball. The oldest plays travel softball. Our son has a girlfriend. He lives in Pinellas County in Florida.
Yes.
And so our daughter actually works for the county. She's an administrator for juvenile court and the juvenile court system. And our son works as a tutor, or he's basically a director of a tutor company that tutors kids that need a little more help at school. So it's a privately owned company. So hopefully they're going to try to move back closer to Georgia at some point. But she's actually from Alabama, so they kind of want to move kind of in between her family and ours. So they're homesick now. They've had their fun down there, and kind of miss the girls too. So our son really likes, that's basically like his kids.
Yes.
So but that's pretty much my story. So.
Well, of course, the next question I want to hear about is how you found your way into construction materials and ready mix, and tell us about that.
Well, the short answer, I had 8 interviews in one day, and came back the next week for another interview. We had a connection at Williams Brothers Blue Circle at the time. Obviously, it had been Williams Brothers for years, and then I think Blue Circle bought them in 85 and 87 is when I started to work there. But so the executive secretary was a family connection that we had up there, and she set up interviews on a Monday, and I had 8 interviews in one day. So
No.
my first interview was at 7:30 in the morning, and my last interview I think was at like 4:30. So I pretty much interviewed, I think, with every department up there, and went back the following week and met with Nick Maloof Sr., which
No kidding.
a lot of people know, icon in the industry.
Yes.
And he actually interviewed, and we had a conversation. I was going to work in the quality control lab, or QA lab at the time was what they called it. So
Let me pause you real quick. Tell me, refresh my memory, where was that office? Where was the office?
on Glenwood Avenue.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
we're
right.
all, you can't even tell now. They had the sand yard over there, and the corporate office was there, a lumber store, concrete plant. So it's completely changed since then. But so Nick, we talked, and I was very interested. He told me, this is what it pays, and it was, if I remember right, $6 an hour.
No
Back
kidding. What,
38,
so that was in
38 years ago.
1987.
1987.
Yes.
In October of 87. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've got a job now that I'm making more, but I did not have insurance. So
Right.
I was looking for something, more stable. And we talked some more, and he finally looked at me. I think he saw the kind of concern on my face, and he said, but there's 10 hours guaranteed overtime every week. So I do some quick math in my head, and I said, let's do it. So that's how I got my start. And then Nick, shortly after that, Nick left and went to, I guess, Ben Hill
Yes.
or Bowen, which became Thomas. And then Earl Dindal took over his place, and Dan Miney worked there. Randy Turpin was over in the quality control department. But that's where I got my start, and learned a lot from the lab manager at the time, Larry Vahusky. That's worked in the lab for about a year and a half, and then Stan Zaglinski, which a lot of people I'm sure recognize that name, brought me out as a field technician. So I worked as a field technician for about a year and a half. So that was about 3 years in, and then there was a downturn in the economy. So I thought, oh, this isn't good, because I'm the new kid on the block. But I hadn't made a name for myself, and they pulled me out of QC and put me in a batch plant. And kind of the funny story behind that, Red Oak, the old
Yes.
batch plant at the airport, which is still down there, but it's a new plant. I was a QC technician down there, and several other plants. But I was in there one day, and the economy was turning down, but there were still a lot of things going on at the airport. So that plant was still doing 500 to 1,200 yards a day. So, and it was just a chaotic day, and I was down there checking lightweight or something, and I just commented to the guys. I said, I don't know how y'all do this. I said, if they ever put me in a batch plant, I think I would just have to quit. About 3 months later, I'm sitting there in that same plant batching concrete. So somebody's watching always. But it was a good experience, because it makes you understand what those guys go through, whether it's the batch guys,
Yes.
the drivers, and it's a great learning experience, because I knew the quality side, but the manufacturing side was a lot different. So, and obviously, it's one of those things where the expectation on my side is do it the quality way. Well, their expectation is do it fast. It's about efficiency. So, there was a kind of a give and take
Right.
there on how things were done. And back then, this was, a lot of the batch computers were automated, but that plant had an old Scorpion ASCO, and it weighed up automatic, but you had to toggle switches to actually load it, so it wasn't set up automatic. So I'm ribbon feeding like, the quality control guy should.
Yes.
Well, the operations people said you got to speed it up. So I would end up being dispatch, and they would batch until they started, overloading the trucks and slowing things down that way, and then they put me back batching. But so it was a good time and a great learning experience, and then worked there for about a year, and then things picked up, and they pulled me back out and put me back in the field as a quality control technician, field technician.
Let me ask you, as I do these things, invariably questions pop into my head. You mentioned in the beginning that you were from Covington. If I'm not mistaken, Tim Christian was from Covington and was an athlete there. Did you happen to, of course Tim was a general manager, I suppose, or head of sales for Williams Brothers. So did you know about Tim, you know what I'm saying, before, when you grew up in Covington? Does that make sense? Did you?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we knew the name. There's probably some connection there, but his dad Frank was I think a builder and developer. So yeah, he was. That family was well known in the Covington area and surrounding areas. And I think his dad put a ready mix plant, which at some point became Allied, there in kind of the Covington-Oxford border. I think he had some financial backing. I'm trying to remember who was there, but I think a couple of guys kind of went in and had shared interest in that plant.
Interesting.
And it's still, it was still there. The property's still there, but I think they crushed concrete there now. So I want to say Allied, at some point RMC Allied bought the plant.
Right.
But it's been taken down for a long time, and they actually crush concrete there now. So.
Gotcha. So back to your pathway. So your path. You went back to quality control. Is that right?
Yeah, so I went back to quality control as a field technician, and before, I was new in the industry, so I had a lot of the outlying rural plants, and then when I came back, they put me in the downtown plants with all, high strength concrete was coming, back and everything, and so it was another learning curve. So I remember Stan Jaglinski telling me when he first brought me in the field, he said, the first year you'll realize you don't know anything about concrete, and then the next year you'll learn some things and you'll think you know everything about concrete, and then the next year you'll realize you don't know anything again.
That's
so
great.
That has stuck with me, and it was true because there's so many changes and developments, and and that was slow progress back then, but as far as changes, and there's been obviously in the last half of my career, there's been a lot more rapid changes in technologies, whether it's batching technologies or truck mounted systems, materials,
yes,
things like that. So there's been a lot more change, but so I did that, and then became field manager. Probably in around 1997, a guy named Dale Williams, which a lot of people probably know, he's with Penetron now. We became field managers, and this was at Blue Circle Williams Brothers. So we had the Atlanta, Macon, Augusta, and Columbus divisions. So we kind of split that territory, and then probably 1998, somewhere in that time frame. That's when Lafarge was trying to buy Blue Circle and try to hostile takeover, and that was thwarted, and the momentum kept going. So there was a lot of people after that left Blue Circle. So I ended up staying there, and I was there 13 years, and there was my boss, which was Alan Sweat at the time, had left.
I remember Alan. Yeah.
And Dale Williams left. Brett Lord left. He was over our lab. He left and went to California. Dan Morgan was over our design department. He left and went to be a fireman. So there were several people left, and they hadn't hired anybody. So I'm trying to do everything, and they finally hired Kirk Diedrich in, I think, May of that year. And all that, the people left between probably March and mid-April.
Yes.
So they finally hired Kirk Diedrich as director in May, and then Rick Tilson, which probably most everybody knows, they hired him in September after I had turned my notice in. So Rick came in my second week of my 2-week notice, and so we had to rapidly train and meet him everywhere, and he's obviously took the reins and ran with it, and I actually ended up kind of doing consulting on the side for a little while. And then,
now, was that in 99 or 2000?
Around 99, 2000. So kind of consulted with Lehigh a little bit for a few months, and then took the job with RMC Allied, and worked there from 2000 until I took over as director of tech services over at Allied, and worked there until 2005, and then Cemex bought RMC,
yes,
which was the largest ready-mix producer in the world at the time, and Ready Mix USA was coming on. They had developed a growth pattern from, I think, 2005 maybe.
Right.
And so they were looking to get into the Atlanta market, and Mark Tyson was looking at, okay, Cemex just bought RMC, so I think he was mainly getting, cement from Cemex, from like Clinchfield and maybe Demopolis, and I think was, concerned, okay, whereas, if they've got to supply all these plants, well, where's it going to put us as a company? So they ended up having talks and did a joint ownership. So I sat in an office and worked for 3 different companies, same office, because it was RMC Allied.
Right.
And then it became Cemex for a short period of time,
Right.
and then Ready Mix USA. So, and that was a good, it was a change going from 2 corporates, because Blue Circle and RMC, both corporate companies, and then Ready Mix USA was a family-owned company, which, so the change was good in a lot of ways, because you didn't have a lot of the corporate red tape. So, if you needed something, you just ask your boss, they asked Mark, and Mark would say yeah or no. So it was a lot simpler, and you could
Right.
get decisions made a lot quicker. But a lot of things we had kept track of, complaint investigations and things like that. I mean, they didn't do any of that. So a lot of our processes we had to kind of, get used to not doing.
Wow.
So stayed there. Then we had a downturn. So I was in Ready Mix for 20 plus years, from 87 till 2008.
Right.
We had the downturn, and so, as many others, I was laid off.
Yes.
And so, long story short, found out there was an opening at W.R. Grace, having to relocate, and my name was given to them, which I had done business with Grace. They were my supplier at Blue Circle and at Allied. And Jeff Chapman, good friend of mine that didn't really know that well, but we had, mutual
Yes.
friends and acquaintances, and he had said, kind of passed my name to them, that they, y'all realize Tim Moss just got laid off. And so I got a call from Bill Cagle, and so it just kind of progressed from there. And Dan Miney called, we did an interview, and so from, I guess, April and then, or late March, then started with W.R. Grace at the time in May, and had to relocate to Alabama. So our daughter was in college, son was in high school, so just kind of got an apartment out there. And we pretty much, I guess from 08 till 2012, I pretty much just had Central Alabama, North Alabama, and up into Tennessee a little bit. And then 2012 we restructured, and that's when I met you.
That's
Vulcan.
right. That's right. I do remember now.
I've got part of Georgia, and Vulcan was one of the accounts that Joe was going into a different role. So Joe Wolf, and so they brought me over, and I had pretty much had everything west of 285, 75, 85, and so I had the Columbus area. So we still had Ready Mix USA over there at the time, so I kept my apartment, and then, as you know, Cemex, I don't remember what year it was, but Cemex started making their own admix.
Yes.
And then, so as long as it stayed Ready Mix USA, we were still supplying. And then as things progressed, they started making their own. So I think it was around 2017, 18. They started producing and actually supplying their plants in the Alabama and Georgia areas. So we lost that business over there, so I pretty much could hit all my other business from my house. So my lease was running up on my apartment in like that September, so I actually moved back to Georgia in 2018, and so it was nice to get rid of the apartment, that expense every month. But it was a good time. Met a lot of new people over in Alabama, and it was great, seeing new things and meeting new people. And it was a different role. I had been in tech services my entire time, except for the 1 year in the operations at Red Oak plant. And so going from that to a sales role was a big change, because it's, you're looking at, a whole different mindset. the way you approach
Yes.
your job. And I remember, talking to several people, and it's like, you might want to drop your dosage on your admix, and they look at me funny. And it's like, I thought you were an admix salesman. It's like, yeah, but I'm here to try to make things better.
Right.
So it's a kind of a joint effort here to make things work right, not to necessarily sell you products. So, and I'm still that way. I'm still more technically minded than I am sales minded. But
Yes.
So pretty much was a technical sales rep until a few years ago, and we had some more changes, and people retired, and they asked me to go into the district manager role. So started out district manager of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, and we had some key account guys that really stepped up and helped, because at that time I had one sales guy, and that was my guy in Mississippi. So we had several people retired, and a lot of those were sales guys and district managers. So I was over 4 states and had one sales guy. So that was a little stressful trying to get around all that. And then as we, Saint-Gobain purchased the company, and we became GCP Applied Technologies several years prior to that, and split off from
Yes.
W.R. Grace. But so the W.R. Grace name is still there, and they oil cracking catalyst, Discovery Sciences, and all that, and then all the construction products were brought over to the GCP Applied Technologies company. So, but Saint-Gobain purchasing us was a great thing. We've expanded and got salespeople in, fill those positions, and since I've taken over, they've made a new district, and I no longer have Tennessee. So, and actually, my replacement is taken over, so I'm no longer district manager over that. But so the new district manager, Jason Ford, he actually came from the industry, worked for Master Builders for years, so it has ready-mix background as well. So he's taken over Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Panhandle. So I'm kind of just lurking in the backgrounds, helping where I can, and working to the end of the year. But so it's it's been good. I mean, it's a lot of friendships made, and a lot of memories from even years ago. And I tell people it's weird, as the more you get put on your plate. I can remember when I was a field technician, 2 or 3 years later, that asked me about a complaint I went to investigate, and I could pretty much verbatim give you the conversation. I can't do that anymore.
You can't.
Yeah, my brain cells are full. So, but that was I guess a long-winded answer to that question.
No. There's so much embedded in that biography, because we learned timing of different acquisitions and the history of the different companies. So this has been really helpful. A number of questions come to mind, and you started to talk about one of them just a little while ago. But if you look back over the years, and obviously you've been heavy on the technical side, the science, if you will, of making concrete, what would you say are the big milestones or big industry changes? The really notable things that you can think that come to mind over the last close to 30 years.
There's been a lot of changes. I mean, I think the biggest thing is in materials. If you look, back when I started, Type 3 was real big for post-tension slabs and precast. Then we kind of got away from Type 3 for a while and went to Type 1 or 1-2, and that was a lot back then. I mean, it was ground finer, and so it wasn't a one-to-one replacement, but you could pretty much do a PT slab, and then along came monitors. So it as well as I do, and I know there's a lot of people working on this, but testing in the field does not duplicate what's in place.
That's right.
So with that, there's been a lot of advancement in the slab monitors, where you can actually check maturity, and if you calibrate it, then your cylinders that were made may show 2,000 psi, but the maturity shows cylinders were probably cured at, especially wintertime, they were sitting in a box, but it was 40 degrees. The mass of the concrete heated it up, and they're actually 3,500 psi. So that's been a savings, I think, for a lot of the construction schedules, because I can tell you the number of times that we would come in and they would say, well, the cylinders only broke 500 psi, the 18-hour cylinders, and it's like, but they've got to finish on the slab. There's no way it's only 500 psi.
Right.
So, and so the maturity meters have made a big change. But then here recently we go to Type 1L.
Yes.
So I mean, Europe has been using Type 1L for years.
Right.
And a lot higher replacement. We're 10-12%.
Right.
They 25-30%. So if you start looking at construction schedules, so I think another big change is just the acceptance. Because I remember probably midway through my career in ready mix, you had some architectural firms and engineering firms looking at sustainability, but it was kind of a hit and miss. I mean, you got Pervious Concrete started up with Dale Fisher, kind of coming into this area because they did a lot in Florida, but for the most part, the owners dictated the schedules because they wanted to, obviously, you get tenants in or get shoppers in, faster the building gets done, faster revenues generated. So over time, I think everybody's embraced that we need to build sustainable buildings. We need to really look at what we're doing because there's only so many raw materials.
Right.
At some point, then there's been a lot of talk. The natural sand sources are going away, and then somebody miraculously finds another source. But
right.
At some point, quarries can only go so deep and so wide. With the carbon footprint, I mean, everybody looks at the cement industry. So, with the advancement, I think, in admixtures and other things, the increased percentage of supplementary materials, a lot of the pozzolans, the advancements in being able to produce quality concrete with less cement,
yes,
and try to keep that production schedule. There's been a team effort, I would say,
yes,
between the owners and architectural firms and engineering firms, the suppliers, vendors like we are, trying to develop new products that work better with higher fly ash mixes, higher slag mixes. So there's that, I think, an overall drive now to where before, you had the pioneers that, they were trying to get something, into the industry that wasn't widely accepted then, and now those things are being more widely accepted, and everybody's coming on board and trying to advance it, because I think everybody realizes, that as time goes on, I mean, you've got, more players in the field, whether it be, ready-mix suppliers, admix suppliers. So there's got to be advancements there to kind of keep everybody in check.
Yes.
Keep everybody going and keep everybody healthy in business, because, there's only so many slices of the pie, and the more people that are eating the pie, that,
yes,
cuts into your profits. And so, I mean, over the several years, I mean, I know, it's kind of it's an odd situation, because there's certain things that drive prices up and there's certain things that drive prices down, but it's a lot easier to, lower prices, whether it's, ready mix or ad mix, and then to get those prices back where you need to be to remain a healthy company is a lot more difficult.
Indeed it is. Tell me a little bit, as you reflect over your career, some of the obviously you've interacted with a lot of great people. You mentioned names, and it may be hard to name, pin this down, but just some who, in terms of influence over your business philosophy and the way you approach business and approach leadership and all. Say a little bit about the influential, the really, you know what I'm saying, the people that have influenced you.
There's been a lot of people. I'd probably leave somebody out if I try to name everyone, but I think my biggest thing, I've always been a listener. My wife will tell you different. She says I like to talk, but I've always been a listener and tried to absorb. And I remember, going back to my beginning when I started in the lab, Larry Vahusky would, he would start trying to tell me something and teach me something, and I would say, just, slow down, I want to write this down. And he would get frustrated, and it's like, no, just bear with me. And so, after about 3 months, I guess he had poured all of his knowledge into me, and I had it all written down and had a binder and had it categorized and everything. And he one day just asked me, we're eating lunch, and he said, "You don't ask me questions anymore." I said, "Because I've got it written down." He said, "Oh, now I know why you did that." So I had a reference guide I could always go back to and
right.
Understand versus somebody explaining it or writing it down. I had it written in my own language where I could understand it. So that's always been helpful to me. So I learned a lot, just in that early stage of materials and design, and because we did a lot of R&D with admixtures and everything. Alan Sweat, as far as management, he was my manager for many years on the ready-mix side, and I remember, when he convinced me to go into management there, I said I didn't really want to, but because I was happy with what I was doing and enjoyed it. I was outside, and obviously, you go inside a plant and they're warm, and you're about to go out in the field on a pour that's 35 degrees. But I was young, and it was I wanted to be outside. But I remember, starting to get projects as I took, manager roles, and I was frustrated one day on a project because I was always one of those, I want to get it done now, And so Alan, his piece of advice was, I was the same way. He said, you've got to learn to space it out. You can't get everything done that you want to get done in a day. And that stuck with me because I still, to this day, when I get a project, I realize, okay, this is too much to get completed in one day, but I still have that tendency that I want to get it off my plate. So, I remember that vividly, Alan saying you've got to be able to understand that you've got to put things off to the next day. So, but, like I say, Alan was my boss for many years on the quality control side, and then he actually went into operations, and then when I went to work for Allied, I worked for him for a little while. He went back into operations over there, and then I took over, as technical services manager over there. So it's been an interesting ride, and I think back, I talk to people all the time, and it's like, you start talking about your career, and it's like, wow, I've been in this 38 years, and it's like a blink of an eye. And, I've probably forgotten more, but, there's just, stories. I mean, everybody knows Mark Probst, I'm sure. I remember, as a field technician when I, first got into that role, had an office at Glenwood, and he was, I think, plant manager at the time there, and a guy named Keith Eason, which a lot of people know. And I had, come in at probably 2 or 3 o'clock that morning on a pour, and it was one of those days where just nothing was going right. Plants were breaking down. We're having to, change, going from one thing to another. And so I come in having to get something done. I don't remember what, but something urgent. So I walk into my office, and everything's turned upside down. Oh, and this is old Williams Brothers furniture. This is back, wooden furniture from Ivan Allen. So my desk was turned upside down. Nothing was, didn't like somebody broke in. Everything was all neat and tidy, but it was all upside down. So my file cabinet, chair, everything. So I, immediately blow my top, turn into the Tasmanian Devil, go in there to the batch office, and they look at me like, what? What's going on? I said, y'all turned my desk upside down, everything on my side, and I've got this task I've got to do. So they come in and help me flip everything back up. But it's stories like that you remember that will stick with you forever. I remember Alan Sweat and I mean, we would have some knockdown drag out because we were both passionate about our decisions.
Right. And
then we'd go have lunch together or a beer after work. So it's kind of odd because I remember Alan and I had probably worked together for 10 years, and there were several of us that went out after work for drinks, and Alan gets quiet, and so everybody else gets quiet, and we look, and you can tell he's deep in thought, and he said, I'm going to tell y'all something I have not told anybody in forever. And so we're all looking at him. He said, I won't use the words he used, but he said, I didn't like this guy when I first met him. So we're looking, then he's looking at me. So I said, you're talking about me? He said, yeah. I said, why? He said, because he had started in the industry probably a year and a half before I did, and so he was, trying to teach me the ropes, and he pretty much said I blew him off and said I knew what I was doing, and so it kind of, I was kind of taken aback.
Yeah.
I was like, I apologize, but why didn't you say something then? He said, well, after a while I realized you knew what you were doing, so I just left you alone. But he was still a great influence, and Alan taught me a lot, along with a lot of other people there that I worked with. So I know I don't want to start naming a bunch of names because I'll leave somebody out, because I've learned from everybody. I mean, whether it's what to do or what not to do, what to say, what not to say. If you're observant, pay attention, you can always learn something from everybody. So That's kind of been my goal and motto throughout my career.
Another question comes to mind. Say a little bit about how the Ready Mix Association brings value to the industry. Just what, from over the years, how does the GRMCA benefit its members?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess probably the biggest thing is the support, the industry support. You're part of a bigger team and part of a bigger movement, as an individual company would be. So I mean, you're pooling your resources together and able to make or get needed changes done, maybe faster or just done, period, where
right.
If you're trying to do that as an individual company or just an individual, people don't always listen. But as this the new job with W.R. Grace, I said Alabama, so you've got ACIA over there,
right,
which is similar to here, and it's the same thing over there. I mean, whether it's truck weights or driver times, I mean, it's not just
or DOT.
Yeah. There's so many things that you guys, and I told you this at John Cook's retirement party. I mean, it was a godsend for you to come to GRMCA, because the passion you have for this industry and for the ready mix, not just the ready mix industry, but the industry as a whole. I mean, you're a driving force behind this, and you've got a great team behind you, and I think that's, especially now with a lot of the changes now, driving towards sustainability, in technology. I mean, there's a lot of the mounted systems on trucks that manage and monitor the concrete, where efficiencies or consistency, all those things y'all are on top of. So it's if you're not in the know, if you're not connected,
right,
then if you're a member of GRMCA, then you're connected.
Absolutely.
So it makes a big difference in just the camaraderie, the support, I think, from one another, because we're all in this industry together.
Yes.
All of us want to make money. All of us want to be profitable so we can support our customers.
Yes.
And that's the main goal. A lot of people feel like, it's, and again, in the ready mix side and even on this side, if you're a large company, people think you're just rolling in money and you can just dole it out anytime they have a complaint.
That's right.
So, it's, I read an article, and I actually shared this with my team a while back, about investment, and it wasn't just investment in the stock market, but it was investment in companies, and it was like, what's going to separate the cockroaches from the, I can't remember what the other term was, but it was talking about how cockroaches survive, and how companies that were going to survive downturns actually start watching expenses and manage programs and processes, efficiencies, manage, how the direction they take their company, whether it be new projects, because I know as an admix supplier, we have a lot of customers ask for different things that there may or may not be a market for. So are you going to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars in R&D for something that may never come to fruition on the revenue stream? So I think it's a balancing act, for all companies. You've got to try to maintain the consistency and, in labor costs, raw material costs, and inflation has hit everybody hard.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where, people have to understand, as a business owner, as a company, because we all work for somebody. If you have your own business, you still have customers. So you've got to stay in business to be able to support your customers. So in doing that, it's a lot more difficult, I would say, than it used to be, because I think everybody's margins, have shrunk due to several factors. And I think the companies that, will end up surviving, again, if you look now, especially on the ready-mix side, when I first started, there were many, we'll say mom and pop or small, small ready-mix companies, and over time, those get fewer and far between. So, there's many more large companies now than when I first started. So there were probably 3 large companies when I first started in the industry, and now there's probably just 6 in this area.
Sure.
So if not 7. So it's an ever-changing industry.
It really is, and I'm really excited for you and your family with your retirement. And I have to ask this question: what are your plans? Do you have any retirement plans in terms of how you're going to spend your time? I'm curious.
Well, we have a Alaskan cruise scheduled in June.
All right.
So, and my wife has already scheduled another one January 11th. So we'll be on a cruise ship shortly after retirement. But so really, we've kind of, we talk about this a lot. There's several things that go on at our church, during the week.
Yes.
That, just, whatever it may be that we, can't do because we're working, and we have, friends that are retired that, some are our age, some are a little bit older, but, that's one of the things. And obviously, softball with our girls will be a big thing. That's, weekend tournaments because our oldest plays travel. So kind of once she gets out of travel, the youngest will probably start doing travel softball. So that's, that's a lot of weekends during the year because they do spring and fall. So, and just, we've got some projects around the house we want to do, but, no major plans right now except going on cruises and, doing some things at the church. But, we've got probably, I would say we'll probably go on 4 cruises next year. We're looking at probably a Mediterranean cruise at some point, things like that. So, that's kind of the bucket list thing. So
good.
So, but really, other than that, nothing. No major plans. That's whatever. A lot of people have asked me. So when do you think you'll get back in it? So I'm like, I'm not really thinking about that right now. I just want to, enjoy some downtime and relaxation, and then kind of see where it takes us.
Well, Tim, on behalf of my team and our board of directors at the association, we congratulate you. We thank you for over 30 years in our wonderful industry. Just really appreciate you, and we wish you the best of success and enjoyment in this next chapter, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Just keep up the good work. You and your team keep up the good work, and I think Georgia's a great place to be. It's, the industry here has always been phenomenal. Obviously it was, I remember when I first took the job with Grace and driving around and, not seeing any construction trucks on the road or no tower cranes coming through Atlanta. So that was a bad time. But, the economy here has always been strong, and, the government here in Georgia has always been strong to keep things moving forward. So, and I think the success, is greatly because of people like you and your organization that, continually striving forward and just, meeting the challenges of, the next day, the next week, the next year. So we appreciate what you do and what your team does.
Thanks, Tim. Take care. Let's go have a retirement luncheon.
Let's go do that.